If you are not moving forward and exploring and learning and discovering, you are falling backwards. We want peace, and we want a future that trends with less violence.
Didn't know what time it was, the lights were low.
Know thy enemy, know thyself. And if you are deceived in your own arrogance and your own dominance of the past, that what you did in the past is sufficient to win in the future, eventually you're going to be a dead man. And this Constitution that America has is the best hope of humanity. We have the creativity. God has given us the brains to create our future, to build it. The way to do that is not to ignore a new domain and new technologies. How do we use this knowledge God has given us to glorify God and not let evil people use it as a weapon against good people? We don't have to be victims. Technology does change fate. All right, welcome everybody, and welcome to the ribbon-cutting episode of the Space Revolution. Chris Paul, thank you for being the co-host today, and welcome to the first show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be able to do this with you, and I think we're going to have a great conversation.
I think we will. So for everybody listening in, I want you to know that the purpose of this episode and this series of podcasts is to help everybody understand what's coming. And what is coming is a space revolution that will involve, things that impact your daily life. And it may be hard to see now, but this is the picture we're going to paint so that you understand why every billionaire on the planet is investing in the space economy, because it's going to be a game changer for your life. So, but I also want you to feel this sense of wonder and inspiration that all of us felt as children and even as adults. When you look up into a starry sky on a dark night and you see those billions of clouds of stars, or the northern lights, and it stirs a sense of wonder in you about who we are, why we exist, what is our meaning, and what is this universe we live in. This is a journey of discovery that is so fantastic and so enjoyable, because this is a seed that's planted in the heart of every human being and is part of the beauty and the magic of life. That's what this show is about, so that we discover what those genius and billionaires are discovering and understanding, and why they're putting all their money into what is coming, and that's the space revolution. So, Chris, before we start, any comments or questions, and then we'll begin.
Well, no, I just think that the unexplored, there's clearly something very human about the curiosity and the wonder when embracing the unexplored. And, one of the points of this, as you communicated, was to be kind of the straight man, the skeptic, as you lay some of this out. And I think that that's an important element of the exploration into the future. One of the ways that I got into a lot of what I do and the thought processes that I employ was I basically decided one day, I don't know for sure if any of the stuff that I've ever heard or ever thought is actually true. So I'm going to wipe the slate and start all over again. And what I found was the joy of discovery all over again. So I think that what you're talking about is kind of the furthest extensions of that.
Good. Well, we're going to start this first episode under the theme of information. Mm-hmm. And the title of this one is "In the Beginning, There Was Truth." And the reason I want to start there is because any journey of discovery requires, first and foremost, that you understand what is true. So let's define truth. What is truth? Truth, in my humble opinion, is two simple words. What is? Mm-hmm. That is truth. Because any journey of discovery, exploration, curiosity can lead you down a path to death if somebody else is lying to you or trying to weave a narrative that is guiding you in a direction that benefits them and it doesn't benefit you and your values. So the search for truth is such an important element in the human condition that I want to start this episode with that. And so, the first point I think I'd like to make, and then just banter about it, is to give everybody an example of how space can change your life dramatically and how it's changed the human race, even in the last number of years. And I'll use GPS as an example. Now, if I say that GPS, the tribe I grew up in Africa wouldn't understand what I'm talking about because they don't have GPS. They don't know what it is. But most people in the developed world understand GPS. And it basically is a technology that just came on the scene with nobody knowing. I mean, it was the Air Force that was told, invest in this and build satellites that give a signal to anybody on the planet, no matter where they're at, for free, that tells them exactly where they're at and helps them get to where they're going and gives them exact timing. And so, you may not have been paying attention, but all of a sudden on your smartphone or in your car, you had technology that allowed you to see where you were at and where you were going. And, so the good news was that changed the economy of the world, because it wasn't just knowing where you're going and the efficiency of transportation. It was also the timing that started synchronizing how water is delivered to your home, how electricity is delivered to your home, and how banks can now, you can go to an ATM and get money. That's because of GPS. That's because of space and those satellites, because it was able to build a neural network in space that could communicate across the entire horizon of that satellite's view almost instantly. And now there was a downside, and that's where technology cuts both ways. Mm-hmm. The upside is now I know where I'm at and where I'm going, and I know my timing to the exact millisecond. The downside is many of us turned off our brains, and now if I don't have GPS, I don't know how the hell to get across the street because I haven't been paying attention to the roads and the turns and the other things that we used to use to get from point A to point B. So that is just one example to help people understand how space can dramatically change your life each and every day. And if we were to turn off GPS, for example, it would literally delete billions of dollars of benefit that the economy has because of GPS. Mm-hmm. And it's just one example. And then, so the thing that's really important here is as we move forward and technology starts changing your life daily that we're going to describe to you, I want this show to give very practical examples like that demonstrate what's coming and what's going to change in the future. So any comments on that? This double-edged sword where technology can do something good, but then it can immediately be used if we aren't smart as people to create a negative side effect or be used by evil people as a weapon against us.
Well, yeah, that's the part that I was going to mention. I mean, I take your point that that it has maybe taken some of the responsibility off of us to know how to navigate our worlds. Every time something is made easier, it's more convenient for us. And then we, to some degree, lose the skill that we used to have that the convenience has replaced. And then, of course, with GPS in particular and a number of other technologies, there's also the downside of the exploitation that you just mentioned. What can evil people use this technology to do? And it turns out, evil people can use that technology to track us and monitor our behavior, including in a lot of ways that we don't really understand it to be tracking and monitoring us. We have all these apps on our phone, for instance, that are linked into the same system. They have our location information, even if they are apps that generally have nothing to do with GPS, like a Facebook or an Instagram or a Twitter or the rest of these social media apps. They know where we are because that same GPS is there. It kind of allows a bad actor to build out a large profile of our behavior and maybe breach levels of privacy that we would expect from corporations, from our government, or whatever.
Yeah, no, you put the nail on the head there. This ultimately, it reveals a problem. And this is a problem that happens anytime there's a new technology that is inserted into the human race. So, for example, fire. When people figured out how to start a fire, not by accident, by a lightning strike, but intentionally, two sticks rubbed together, flint, whatever technique, people learned how to start fire. All of a sudden, it was burning down their huts. It was asphyxiating them in their caves. It was killing them because they didn't understand it and they didn't have the tools to harness it for productive purposes and prevent it from doing harm. The same is true with this. And what I would say, the way I would characterize where we are at as a human race with regard to this information explosion is that we are like teenagers with awkward muscles, where we have this thing called the internet and we have these things called smartphones that has seduced us into the convenience that it gives us, but it has also trapped us into being totally vulnerable financially, physically, and really, in some cases, emotionally, as we take a look at how people have tainted the spirit of our children to be depressed and to be anxious that they aren't keeping up with the Joneses because everything on the internet looks like your friend is in heaven doing great things and you're a bum that is falling behind. And they aren't mature enough necessarily as a child to understand how deceptive an image can be or words can be when people aren't telling the whole truth. So here is how I would describe the situation we're in right now. We need our geniuses, our business leaders, our governments to design the tools that give us privacy, independence, our civil liberties, and our self-determination, but yet provide all the benefits that this information can give us. And I'm here to tell you that is possible. We are, as you heard in the intro, our brains that God has given us are so incredible at inventing out of thin air tools that help us deal with our strategic environment, the external environment we're in. And right now we are stuck as a human race where if you want to take advantage of the benefits of information, you become a victim in all these areas. And that is unacceptable. We have to demand these tools. And there are people working on them, believe it or not. And that's going to get back to a second point I'm going to make about space and how space is going to change the world forever in another round. It's not just the current state, the kind of the kindergarten age where we have a satellite up there that's beaming down a signal of timing and location. The next step is going to blow your mind, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But I really appreciate that question is how do we preserve our privacy, our independence, our civil liberties, and our self-determination, but yet take advantage of all the benefits of the information age we live in?
Yeah. So you mentioned truth there. And I think that truth is, of course, the root of all these things. And you have to be following that path. Truth, I think you framed it as truth is what is. And to some extent, I think that that's, I would obviously agree with that. I think, is it more, is it less? Is truth about the world contingent on a certain understanding of the world that exists in the minds of men, and yet, there's a limit to what that truth can actually be, because there are certain higher level truths that we simply don't have access to. And I think one of the sticking points for a lot of people when they begin embracing some of these conversations about what lies beyond, about the next generations of technology and the rest of it is there, like, do we have a good enough understanding of what is to be able to venture into those areas that we just will never know? And is that mystery a permanent state of being?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's true. In other words, I'll just take the example that when Einstein, fully developed the theory of general relativity, he knew it wasn't right. And as the great thinkers have been developing the theory of quantum, the two are irreconcilable. In other words, we got it wrong. And so everything from gravity to light, to matter, and to time are all incorrect. Our understanding is incorrect. To say it is true that that gravity, is immutable, where it's always going to, make the rock fall at the same rate, is totally false. And so we have to walk into the future with this deep sense of humility that we don't know anything. I mean, we are like cavemen crawling around, blind, dumb, and deaf in a dark cave, and all we can do is feel the contours of the wall.
Mhm.
That's how, and that is to understate how little we know about our universe and how much discovery and beauty and joy we have yet to discover as a human race. But every time we hit a plateau, all the scientists and engineers will tell you we've discovered everything there is to discover. Now it's only a matter of making it a little bit better until the next breakthrough. And so our humility before our God and our Maker that has made a universe that is so wonderful and so intricate and so complex that the human mind will never be able to comprehend. We need to walk in with this deep sense of humility. But that gets to another part of this show that I want to explore is, what do we need to do as human beings in our interior life with our own arrogance, pride, ego, envy, all the things that we struggle with? How do we need to condition ourselves with our habits so that we can usher in these discoveries in a way that is more uplifting of the human condition, with less violence, less war, more abundance, peace, security, and health for all human beings? Because the goal is that as we stumble our way through the dark and we discover new wonders and new magic, that we didn't know about life and love, the powerful things that really drive us forward. How do we design them to be more peaceful, more prosperous in the future, and not repeat the mistakes of the past? So you're right. Truth, we will never fully know, but the pursuit of truth is essential. And the trick is, how do we triangulate truth as human beings in a world that is filled with more darkness than light because of our minds that are masked by sin?
Yeah, and I would say that if people are going to embrace truths about these levels of the unknown, these aspects of potential futures, technologies that might become tools for good or evil, that's going to require an openness from people that is not promoted with rigid adherence to the certainty that we know things we cannot possibly know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And that's a form of arrogance. Just like
Indeed.
there are scientists that are clinging to the general, relativity, and will not accept what we are observing in quantum. So, and we can get into some of that detail in future episodes. But what I'd like to do is kind of just also open up now the next step. Okay, so part of this show is about using plain, simple English to describe what is coming based on the knowledge of technology that is already demonstrated. And so what is coming next is something you hear the great geniuses of our age talk about. And that is that the convergence of artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, quantum, supercomputing, and storage in space is going to have an impact on you. And when you couple that with laser communications and our knowledge of communication, what we are going to see in the near future, which you already see glimpses of with SpaceX and what China is doing, is that every human being on the planet with a very simple and cheap device that may not look or feel like a smartphone, but with a very cheap device, will be connected to every other person on the planet in a way that allows them to benefit from education that is not blocked by language barriers or cultural barriers, and informed of what is the situation going on in the world in a way we currently don't understand. Artificial intelligence, and especially quantum, as it comes online, will be able to paint a picture for every human being about what is going on around them, and understanding how they are either free or enslaved based on a knowledge that they currently may not have. So that can be dangerous, but this goes back to, how do we protect ourselves from what is coming?
Sure. We've had a number of these exchanges over the years at the GART events. Um, a lot of the it's my impression of the way you discuss some of these technologies that these are not exclusively new ideas, but these are in some instances ideas that have been pushed to the side for whatever reason. Are these all new approaches to science, to innovation, to understanding the physical nature of our world? You described in the Sean Ryan podcast some things about quantum that I think blew a lot of people's minds, that people would say, well, that messes with my understanding of time, or that
Yeah.
messes with my understanding of space. 100 years ago, there might have been a lot more people talking about ether in the sciences, for instance, and we don't hear about that stuff anymore. But you bring up the quantum. We talked about in the pre-show. I've been reading a book called Irreducible by Federico Fagin, who's the inventor of the microchip, if I'm not mistaken, and he is kind of attempting to reconcile relativity, as you mentioned, with quantum theory. And he's describing these fields, and the picture begins looking a lot like that other picture, that alternate picture of our physics, and kind of import some of the mystery and the nature of God with that, using the scientific language to describe these things, and not really porting in the spirituality, but allowing for it.
Yeah, well, so that, and again, one of the things I want to do in this show, Chris, is I don't want this show to be something people come to learn. I want them to use this show as a place to come to figure out what questions to ask, what questions to plant in their mind as they watch these things develop. And then I'd like to give them something to read that helps them start going on a journey of discovery for themselves on these issues.
Mhm.
And that is a good one, because he actually does use the word spirituality, that when you take a look at, and this comes back to something I've said since the beginning of my knowledge of quantum and watching what it does in the laboratory, for me, it was the evidence of God.
Yep.
But he says it in a different way, that it reflects the fact that free will, which is what God has given us. So we aren't puppets and we aren't pets. We are, infinite creatures with free will that can destroy ourselves if we want to, or uplift ourselves if we want to. And his conclusion, when you read the book, is that spirituality lies at the beginning. In fact, information starts before matter, time, and space, knowledge and knowing. And there, this is what I would propose, is that would be a great book for this first session on information. And in the beginning, there must be truth. In the beginning, there is truth. And without that, any journey we go on is going to lead in the wrong direction. And so, the next step of what space can do, because again, space can allow us on the planet to tap into a neural network of supercomputing that exists today. So these are not new technologies, but they're applied in a different way. It's like, the steam engine, which changed the world. We already knew about steam. We already knew about compression, but nobody had put them together in an engine that allowed you to use water to propel, massive machines to do work that we couldn't do as human beings, at least not with our current technology. Now, more things have been forgotten that have been learned. Look at the Great Pyramids, and we can go on and on and on. But the reality is that the next step that you're going to see from space is these geniuses of our age deploying into space these technologies we see on Earth right now. And this is something that's hard for people to recognize. But as an astronautical engineer, or a person that studied rocket science as the foundation of my educational background, and then living in the Air Force for 33 and a half years, watching the technology, I can tell you that we have never deployed into space for the average person the kind of computational power that can support AI edge computing, laser communication. We just have never deployed the kind of storage and supercomputing and communication capability to really make space come alive in a way it could. So what you're going to see now that we know how to do that, and that is being deployed into space, you're going to now see that you have access on your smart device to painting the entire picture of what's going on in the world. And what's beautiful about this, when we think about discovery and trying to build a better world with less violence, now we can start painting the picture of those tyrants and despots that have been enslaving people using the economy, water, food, electricity, and information as a weapon against people to support their own power, greed, control, and wealth. And I'll give the example of my father-in-law and his wife, my wife's mom and dad. That when he retired from business, he went into the Peace Corps with his wife, and they went to Uganda. And as a civil engineer, he saw that the people didn't have running water. So he built a well, and he built a system for people to get water abundantly. And the moment he did that, the chief that was living on the top of the hill in a mansion, driving a Rolls Royce, where children were dying of malnutrition and a lack of water down the hill, he basically told my father-in-law that the witch doctor was going to put a spell on him. And here's what happens whenever that happens is you end up dead within a few days. So he had to flee the country with his wife because the tyrant and despot that was controlling the people through the control of water, food, electricity, was not going to give up his cushy life of stealing the money from USAID and all the NGOs and giving none of it to the people. But imagine when the people of Africa, every one of them, can see the money flowing in to help them and see how much actually gets to them. It will change the game where you can now self-organize, you can educate, you can learn about health, you can understand the environment. And it reminds me of Mother Nature, and that is, take a look at the orca whales. If you study the orca whales, they communicate with one another across the entire breadth of the ocean, and they move and act with the knowledge of what is going on in every pocket of the ocean. And they are damn smart. Imagine where every human can act and move and make decisions based on being informed with a holistic knowledge of what is going on globally. And if we can do that and preserve our independence, our security, our privacy, our self-sufficiency, and our civil liberties, man, think of what will change when the theft that goes on in this world, the corruption that goes on in this world, that no evil person can hide because everybody is a sensor that can phone a friend, grab a lifeline, and reveal where these cockroaches live, shine a light on these cockroaches so that they cannot live and they cannot survive. What a beautiful world that would be.
So is this enabled by peer-to-peer decentralization that is uninterruptible? Is that the picture that we're seeing, so that everybody through this interconnectedness, which is probably on some level device related, and maybe there's, that next step in Fajin's book, it seems like the quantum is kind of the move out of just the material. The machine is, in fact, not enough. The machine needs the spark of humanity, which is the spark of God. And these things somehow merge or enmesh. And that is then the next level. Am I getting that picture? Am I like in the ballpark?
That is. That's the right question, where we as the masters of our machines take our rightful place as the dominant force of creativity, morality, vision, and consciousness. And that is what no machine will ever be able to do. And there are people that people use fear to sell books and stoke fear to try to create a doom and gloom of the future. And it is a cancer to our children. And so I think this book that you're talking about, Irreducible, is probably a good homework assignment for anybody that is curious about the beauty of the heavens and the beauty of truth, to inform us as we try to discover more, that we can be the masters of these machines. And so as these techniques and technologies are deployed, asking the right questions of our government and our business leaders that develop these technologies to put us in firm control of these machines, so that, again, these attributes that no machine will ever be able to possess: consciousness, morality, vision, creativity, those are the domains of the people. And the reason people think AI is creative is because it can look creative.
Mhm.
Because it can see patterns in the data that we can't see quickly enough. And it can say, hey, here is, let's take snowflakes. I think, we can make a machine that says, okay, I'll make you all these snowflakes. We look at one and say, that is beautiful. You're an artist, robot. You're creative. You're visionary.
Mhm.
And in reality, it's just an opportunity that it saw in the patterns that it was programmed to, that we had never seen before. But it is not creative. It is not moral. It is not visionary. And so understanding quantum will help people understand why the machine will never be the human being, ever, unless we want it to be, and we give up our right as human beings to be the masters of our universe.
Yeah, it's really not enough to get the machines right if you're getting the spirituality and you're getting God wrong.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And this is why I want this series to also be on the interior life. What have we screwed up as a human race, that there are people that doom out on the future? And what I want is this wonder, the same wonder that we feel when we look up in a dark night sky to the billions of stars, that make us feel this questioning of, what is my purpose, and why am I here? I want them to feel that same sense of joy and wonder as they think about how technology will change our fate, and that we can uplift the human condition and usher in an age of prosperity and security and health, the likes of which the human race has never seen. And space is the high geography that can connect us together, so that we can see the big picture collectively without giving up our humanity, our privacy, our free will. These are things that are non-negotiable, but right now they're all at risk. So this is one reason why I want to do this series of podcasts. I want people to understand that we can have our cake and eat it too, that we can allow these technologies to usher in a new future, but we have to be the intellectually curious ones. We have to be the aggressive learners. We have to be the ones that are critically thinking about what are the right questions we should be asking, and demand of our technology, our business leaders, and our governments to abide by the principles by which we lay down the law. And our Constitution is the best hope for humanity. You've heard me say that before.
Mhm.
And we need to know it, we need to understand it, and we need to abide by it. That's why I get so excited about this, is because I want everybody else to understand what our billionaires already know. And that is that the future is bright. It is filled with a bigger pie for everybody, which will allow more food and shelter and water, information, transportation, energy, and healthcare for every person on the planet, not just those of us that are lucky enough to live in Western society. And I cannot wait for all this to get to the tribe I grew up in, that suffered from ill health because there was poor water, and because there was poor shelter, and there was no electricity, and there was a lack of education about what keeps you healthy and how you build an economy that is sustainable, how you are good stewards of the earth and the universe. So it's about time humanity recognize that we have the technologies to reach the heavens for infinite truth, energy, and resources. And we can start the journey now if our interior life is right and we ask the right questions.
Maybe I'm not sure how much time you have left, but I think from the skeptic side, one would wonder if there is something utopian about this vision. And I thought you might comment on the dangers of utopian thinking in general.
Yeah, so this is where it says, "Be as clever as a serpent, but as kind as a dove." This is where we have to be vicious about our own humility and our own recognition of what dealing with what is, and dealing with what is dealing with the sinful nature of humanity, where there are evil people out there that will lie, steal, cheat, and kill you just because they can.
Mhm.
But I believe that there are more good people on this planet that love their children and love others as God has taught us. Love God first and love others as God has loved you. And recognize the power of love, that is the key. If all else fails, love will guide us through. So don't be utopian by burying your head in the sand and hoping for a future. What I'm talking about is rolling up our sleeves and being viciously aggressive about learning and understanding ourselves and our enemy, which is evil, and by doing so, building a future that gives us the tools, the weapons, that arms us with the shield and the sword and the helmet that prevent evil from crushing what good men create. And when I say men, I mean all people. And there's no woke here. The human race, humanity, is about all people. And the more voices we have in that, the more cultures that speak up, the more diversity of thought that we have as we go forward, not in a utopian way, but in a realistic way, the quicker we're going to build a future that we like.
So it's not that this wonderful future is guaranteed, but that it's available if we build it.
That's right. And more where that came from, because just like we're finding out that classical physics is wrong and all the things we were taught in high school are not true. They may be true in a little bubble in a certain place on planet Earth, but the universe is so much bigger, and time is not what we think it is. Space is not what we think it is, and matter is not what we think it is. And now it starts making sense of all those biblical stories about if you just had the faith of a mustard seed, you could move that mountain. You could make that tree transplant in the bottom of the ocean and thrive. So it's about this humility that we go forward with open eyes, but with a vicious aggressiveness about learning. And if human nature can be lazy. That's part of the downside of human nature. And if we give into laziness or just efficiency or the conveniences of these devices without understanding what they're doing to us internally and externally, shame on us, and we deserve what we get. It's like what our founding fathers said, it's a republic if you can keep it. And right now we're fighting like hell to keep it. And it is, still not a certain thing. And the same is true with this technology. It can kill us if we aren't awake as a human race and paying attention to these conversations we're going to have in this series. And in this series, it's really easy to try to boil the ocean. So we're not going to do that. We're going to focus on three major pillars of prosperity. And that is information, which we talked about today. And in future episodes, we're going to talk about energy and we're going to talk about resources. And then we're going to come back to information. We're going to bounce around a little bit. And so our next guest next week is going to be John Harold. And I'm going to ask him which of those categories he wants to talk about, and we'll explore something else. It may be information again, it may be truth, it may be energy, it may be resources, but within that lie thousands and thousands of conversations that start building a consciousness and awareness of what is coming. And that's the beauty of this is this show is not about answering questions for you. It's about getting to the right questions and then giving you some homework. So I think we've already got the homework assignment, and that's irreducible. And you can put that in the chat if you'd like.
I'll do that.
But I'd like you to close us out with, based on this short conversation, what are the right questions for people to plant in their heads where they can't get it out? And as you are thinking about that, I want to also point people to the lyrics of Starman that were part of the intro by David Bowie. I want you to listen to those lyrics very closely, because what we are going to talk about is going to model some of the things. This is an example of how artists can see into the future like most of us cannot. And so, he talks about the joy and the wonder of space, but he also talks about the threat that joy and that wonder and that exploration will be killed by the boss man, by governments, because they don't want you to know. Knowledge is power, and power threatens power.
Mhm.
And the real question is, can we as a human race keep government off our backs, because it keeps creeping back into our lives and eventually enslaves us, like we're enslaved in America right now with taxation and with information. And can we design a future where we keep government off our backs forever, as it keeps crawling back to us? And that song is perfect for this show, because it's going to, if you listen to this show, every episode, you will start creating a series of questions and sources of knowledge that, if you are worthy of this journey of aggressive learning, you will be one of the free people of the future, where your free will is protected, even if others let it go.
Yeah. So, I mean, the question that I would pose is, you just mentioned the enslavement by these institutions, these systems of systems.
Yeah.
We are enslaved, I think, primarily by a series of institutional lies that are enforced societally. They are incentivized, they are punished. There's a system that protects the system and implants that system into our minds as a substitute for the reality that we interact with. And I think, this is my estimation, I mean, this is my work. I think that the only way out of that problem is to be prepared to withhold belief from absolutely everything until you can come to it yourself, or until you have a decision point where you need to decide one way or another. But I think the question that underlies that is, how do I know the thing that I am thinking right now? And a lot of times when we dig down and examine that question, we find out that we know it from the trust of some authority, something that we've been told. We understand that there's a consensus around it and the rest of it. So how do I know this thing I think I know, would be the question that I would pose.
No, that's a great question, and I would add to it the balancing factor of, if you are paralyzed by analysis. In other words, if you never know and you never decide to take a step, you'll never take a step. So the paralysis by analysis can also be a negative. If you're not willing to take a step forward in faith, based on your best ability to understand truth, you will fall back. So, and you will be a victim of others that are stepping forward, even if it's incorrect. So, in my life, the way I do it is, when I have a decision to make and I'm uncertain, because I try to be humble and not believe anything until I can prove it, knowing that I can't prove anything perfectly. I pray about it, like King David did. I pray, okay, God, is this the right step? It's the best I can do right now, but I got to move or I'm going to be dead. Speed is life. As a fighter pilot, that is the number one thing we know. Speed is life. It's true in business and innovation, and it's true in this case. So as we ask that perfect question that you just talked about, we also have to balance it with, if I don't move, I die. And so sometimes you have to move on faith, and you're going to get it wrong. The question is, how wrong? Was it wrong enough that you're going to die, or was it wrong enough that you can survive and learn and take another step?
Yep. And if you hew to that objective underlying truth that God is, your direction is going to be right a whole lot more often than it's wrong.
Yeah. So that's a great question. What other question would you say, we should stick in our brains here as we end this session and move to next week?
Well, certainly something that I would like to hear from you and for the audience to think about. There's a lot of parts of the space conversation that are strictly gate kept, with societal influence, with reputational punishment and the rest of it for asking certain questions. I think we need to be open to the whole panoply of conversations that this evokes. And I think that the question I would pose then is is our definition of space limited, and in what ways?
Yeah, it is limited, and in fact, if you do the homework and read this book, you'll find how limited it really is. So, space revolution is really about the revolution of the human race to go on a journey of discovery that can lead us out of the dilemmas and the problems we have created to date. And one of them is the fact that we have limited resources, or at least we feel like that. So, space revolution is talking about the fact that there is a revolution that's coming using space as a geographic high ground, but it is so much more than that. It would be like saying there's an ocean revolution as we develop deep sea navigation and ships, okay? It's not about the ocean, it's about the human race and uplifting the human condition. And the ocean just gave us a pathway to many markets to allow cultures to come together and create more beauty. The same is true here. Our conception of space is totally warped by classical physics that is totally wrong, and quantum physics that we have no clue about. We have no understanding of what is going on there. But we can see what is happening. We can see what is. We don't understand it. And so that's why everybody needs to keep an open mind that we don't know what space is. But we need to continue on this journey of discovery to find out what's going on. And the analogy I've given to this question before, so these two questions are great and they need to be stuck in the minds of everybody as we go forward. But the analogy I give is when the first caveman saw a bolt of lightning strike the ground and start a fire, he didn't know what the hell just happened, but he did know that fire created warmth and it consumed the fuel that it was burning. And he was like, I don't know how that happened. I don't know why it happened, but I sure like the effect. And then it went from there.
Well, that's quite an analogy.
And here we are. We've, quantum is a strike of lightning. We don't know what the hell we just saw. We don't know how or why, but we like what we see because it reveals that free will is baked into the DNA of every molecule, every atom, every amoeba. Free will and consciousness. Holy shit. That's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
Okay. Well, I thank everybody for joining us. And these are intentionally shorter podcasts because, again, we don't want you to come here to learn any answers. We want you to come here to start asking the right questions and do your own investigation, because curiosity is a habit. And if you don't practice the habit, you lose it. And by damn, this world needs curiosity right now more than ever if we're ever going to recover from the incredible global slavery that has inflicted the entire world. And it's not just third world countries like the one I grew up in the small tribe in Africa. It is the Western civilization that is enslaved, and the few are dominating our free will. The fact that my children cannot afford a house, even on 2 salaries, both college educated, is an example of how we are going backwards as a human race, not forwards. And we got to stop it, and we got to stop it now.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your evening and get to work. Do your homework and be ready for next week's show. Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.